Is the application to it's a community involvement application of a class that is normally theoretical. This is the first time that we do this with this class, and so I think it's working out really well. But I want to see what you have to say in your presentations. Okay, so who wants to be the first one to present?
Okay.
You want to go first? Okay. So which one was yours?
The one with the cloud.
Did you remember? Okay, just click on it and then say play. And I'm going to sit here.
Do you want me to strike it for you?
Yeah.
Oh, I could do that.
Oh,
I could sit here.
Okay. Entonces, miren, yo lo voy a hacer en español porque, como le dije, quiero practicar mi español.
Okay.
Entonces, estos son 6 ejercicios para facilitar la ortografía en español para los estudiantes disléxicos. Y mi nombre es Daniela Luna. Para la siguiente.
Oh, here, okay.
Entonces, un poquito los estudiantes que tienen que son disléxicos suelen tener dificultades con la ortografía. Entonces, como acabamos de hablar, tienen dificultades diferenciando diferentes palabras que tienen diferentes letras que usualmente son confusas. Entonces son inconsistencias entre los fonemas y las grafemas, si lo dije bien.
Sí.
Y los ejercicios que yo hice se centran en el refuerzo interactivo, visual y auditivo para los estudiantes que tienen esta dificultad. Yo lo pongo en la siguiente. Creo que le va a tocar como deslizar para abajo. Sí, así. Entonces, el primer ejercicio es de clasificación, entonces la diferencia entre un fonema y un grafema. Entonces un fonema es el sonido de una letra o combinación de letras, y mientras el grafema es una representación escrita. Entonces el objetivo de este ejercicio es ayudar a los estudiantes a vincular los sonidos con las letras. Entonces esos son los pasos del ejercicio. Entonces el instructor en este caso crearía tarjetas con palabras o con letras que se suelen confundir, como la B y la V, la doble L y la Y, y la C y la Z. Esos son nada más algunos ejemplos, pero son los más comunes. Después el instructor dirá como una palabra, por ejemplo en este caso yo puse banco, y el estudiante va a decir con qué letra se tiene que, esa palabra, en qué lado tiene que estar. Y entonces este ejercicio ayuda a conectar el sonido, que es el fonema, con las letras utilizando la escritura. Entonces en el siguiente es básicamente, entonces el profesor o el instructor va a decir la palabra, entonces el estudiante tiene que decir o es con la B o con la V, y lo pone nada más en un lado o en el otro. El siguiente ejercicio se llama trazando las palabras con los dedos. Entonces el objetivo es reforzar la ortografía correcta mediante una experiencia multisensorial. Entonces esta idea me salió, tengo una prima que tiene 3 años y así es como está aprendiendo español, entonces dije que tal vez pueda ayudar. Los pasos para este ejercicio es escribir en las letras grandes palabras que suelen ser mal escritas, por ejemplo, por qué o éxito. Los estudiantes van a trazar las palabras con los dedos y mientras las dicen en voz alta, entonces para hacer esa conexión entre las manos, y mientras lo dicen les puede ayudar más a tener la diferencia de qué letras son las que tienen que utilizar. Luego van a cerrar los ojos y hacer lo mismo, pero van a visualizar la palabra en su mente. Y después, utilizando este método, utilizan el tacto, la vista y el sonido para ayudar a recordar la palabra ortográficamente. Entonces tiene como pasos que les puede ayudar. Y este es como el ejemplo visual, digámoslo así. Entonces se dice la palabra, también una de las otras letras comunes que son difíciles es la J y la G. Entonces, por ejemplo, en este ejemplo es ejemplo. Entonces, en este ejemplo es ejemplo. Entonces la E comienza con el dedo y después, al final, después cierran los ojos y lo visualizan. Entonces, haciendo esa conexión, puede que nos ayuden ortográficamente. El tercer ejemplo son cadenas de palabras que riman. Entonces, enseñar reglas ortográficas utilizando familias de palabras. Entonces, dar como una palabra base con una ortografía difícil, como juego, como acabo de decir, la J y la G. pedir a los estudiantes que encuentren las palabras que rimen y sigan la misma regla ortográfica. Entonces, por ejemplo, juego, fuego, luego. Y esto ayuda a los estudiantes a recordar patrones ortográficos a través de rimas familiares. Entonces, en el siguiente es más o menos como es la visualización del ejemplo. Entonces, está la palabra juego, después fuego, después luego, y entonces el mismo patrón ortográfico es el juego. Entonces, si hacen esa conexión mentalmente y si se les hace práctica, ellos saben como, ok, juego, yo dije que se le cambiaba la primera palabra y pueden hacer esa conexión que es con la J. El cuarto ejercicio son patrones ortográficos con códigos de colores. Yo soy una persona que yo diferencio cosas por colores y así es como me acuerdo yo. Entonces pensé que tal vez también esto podía ayudar. Entonces reforzar visualmente las reglas ortográficas mediante colores. Entonces se asigna un color a cada regla ortográfica. Entonces digamos rojos para la B y azul para la V. Proporciona una lista de palabras y pedir a los estudiantes que resalten a las letras según su categoría ortográfica. Esto refuerza visualmente cómo se usan las letras en la escritura. Entonces, en este caso, la B y la V, entonces banco, que con color naranja sea la B y con color verde sea la V. Entonces, le damos como un ejercicio y que ellos subrayen para que hagan la diferencia, y también utilizando fotos les puede ayudar a visualizar como, oh, me acuerdo cuando hice este ejercicio, vi el edificio del banco, esto es con la B. Entonces esto también les puede ayudar. El quinto ejercicio es desafío con letras faltantes. Entonces ayudar a los estudiantes a reconocer patrones de letras en contexto. Entonces proporcionamos oraciones con letras faltantes, donde los estudiantes deben completar letras comúnmente confundidas. Entonces en este caso es la C y la S. Yo sé que creciendo tuve mucho ese problema. Entonces, por ejemplo, la canción está en el computador y los estudiantes deciden con qué letra van, en este caso con C o con S, van en el espacio y explican su razonamiento. Entonces hay un ejemplo del siguiente. Entonces, están diferentes oraciones, vamos a leer las primeras tres. Entonces, la canción, y va a haber como una raya para que ellos puedan poner la letra correcta. La canción está en el computador, el cielo está muy difícil, la cebra corre rápido. Entonces ellos pueden poner la letra que es correctamente, y al practicar y practicar les va ayudando más. Y el último ejercicio es un juego de laberinto ortográfico. Entonces hacer la práctica ortográfica que sea divertida, algo como también chévere para hacerlo. Entonces en este ejercicio el instructor crearía un laberinto imprimible, o puede ser digital, donde los estudiantes deben elegir las palabras correctas escritas para salir del laberinto. Entonces, si eligen la palabra incorrecta, pues no van a poder salir, pero si eligen la correcta, sí van a poder salir. Entonces, en este juego se convierte el aprendizaje un poquito más divertido, una experiencia lúdica, y refuerza las elecciones ortográficas correctas. Entonces, en el siguiente, yo elegí la palabra hijo. Lo que hablamos de la H no suena. Entonces, por ejemplo, hijo con H, hijo sin H, la correcta es con H. Entonces, si eligen el hijo sin H, no van a poder salir, pero entonces tienen que devolver y tienen que ir por el correcto. Entonces, así van aprendiendo. Cositas así chiquitas les puede ayudar a personas, estudiantes que son disléxicos. Y creo que son los ejercicios. Entonces, muchas gracias.
Estupendo. Sí, lo importante es que sean divertidos como este, ¿verdad?
Sí.
Y también el color es fundamental para reforzar, porque las reglas realmente no existen, ¿no? Las llamamos reglas ortográficas, pero tienen todo tipo de excepciones. Una regla que tiene muchas excepciones realmente no es una regla, porque no se sabe cuándo las excepciones van a aplicarse. Muy bien. A ver, ¿quién quiere ser el siguiente? ¿Eres?
Okay.
Quien quiera.
Ya, está bien.
Entonces voy a cerrar para empezar a terminar cosas de ahí arriba. No sé cuál es el tuyo.
Creo que no la había
¿No?
No.
Porque
Porque
era de Charlie,
no.
Romero.
creo que
Llegué un poco.
Ah, entonces está en tu correo, en el correo.
Sí, debería.
¿Cuándo lo enviaste?
Esta semana pasada creo que... Ahí está.
¿Y este qué le tengo que hacer?
Para abajo.
Trabajo. Ah, no, este
That's
está
a second.
Oh, okay.
Okay, mine's gonna be in English. My name is Jacqueline, and this is my ACE project. Dyslexia in Spanish, it's a learning disorder that affects reading and writing skills of individuals. Some difficulties that they may encounter is not being able to break down words into their individual sounds, nor understanding the sounds and structures of words, which in the 6 things that we've been talking about, that's one of the main things, not being able to distinguish those individual sounds. Okay, so for the H issue, the strategy that I selected is practicing their writing skill. This one will be done by writing, there will be, I didn't provide examples, but playing audios of different sentences that contain H words and non-H words. The students then write the words out with what they think is the right spelling. The correct spelling is then presented to them and they can fix any mistakes. Some of the sentences that I had seen is like, este vaso de jugo necesita hielo. So that's a word where H is silent. Or one word it's echar and echar. It means different things, but there's one with an H and one without the H, and that
For
changes.
ejemplo, oyo y oigo.
Yes.
Okay.
Why it works, the audios are played for them. We'll give the words context that can help the students differentiate them. Setting the strategy up like a game will encourage them to try to get the most correct. This helps expand their vocabulary and exposure, which enforces the silent nature of the H in these words. Okay, the B and V issue. In Spanish, B and V are pronounced alike, which can lead to some spelling difficulties. For my strategy, I will use a catchy mnemonic sentences to help students associate words with the right letter. Like we have los bichos buscan burros bonitos bailando en barcos. It reminds students that the word starting with bus take B, and then with the V we have voy a ver la velocidad del viento en la ventana. Includes words that always take V, voy, ver, velocidad, viento, en ventana. So it kind of makes it fun because in a way it's also like makes them stumble around with their words. And why it works, mnemonic sentences work because the brain recognizes patterns. The more mnemonic sentences they practice, the more likely they are to associate the spelling patterns to the correct sounds, also making the sentence silly, which makes it more fun and engaging for the students. And then we have the J and G issue. Depending on its context, J and G can sometimes be pronounced the same in Spanish, which can lead to some spelling difficulties. For this strategy, we will practice color coding the words to provide visual recognition. We will assign colors to highlight words that follow the specific spelling patterns. Students will be given a reading or a list of words and will highlight the words that have the shared J-G sound with the correct color. Because sometimes it will have a J or a G, but it won't be that shared sound, so they will only be highlighting the ones that have the shared sound, and they will have to pick the correct highlighter color for each one. The color coding helps students recognize these J and G spelling patterns by using the visuals of the colors as the brain remembers them more easily, so it would be isolated colors. It also provides the repetition needed to recognize the patterns without having them guess the right answers. Okay, and for the Q issue, we have when the letter Q is followed by the U, it can produce a K sound, like in the word que. In Spanish, the K sound can also be produced by the letter, making it difficult for some people to differentiate between the correct spelling of words. The strategy I used to tackle this problem is find a rule, fix the mistake. This strategy requires students to learn the proper spelling rules of que, se, and ca. Once the students have learned these rules, they apply them by finding the mistakes in pre-written sentences. So this one will have like sentences that are wrong, and it will be their job to find it and fix the mistakes.
I didn't mention that in my presentation, but we have a related issue with G, right? For guerra, we have to write a U. Same thing with querer. And it's one of the few cases in Spanish where we have a letter that we don't pronounce at all, just like the H.
Why this works, by asking the students to spot the errors, it trains the brain to recognize the right patterns by fixing the incorrect one. It requires them to have to discover the errors which help them retain the knowledge longer. Allowing the students to make these corrections also helps them build their confidence with the letters, which can reduce their future mistakes.
And then for the ZC issue, pronunciation varies by dialect, like we were talking about earlier. So this issue isn't found across all dialects, but it arises when some words change their spelling, when pluralization changes, or words are made diminutive. The strategy I would use for this is apply the rule, practice the pattern. This strategy requires you to teach the rules clearly to them. Then you emphasize the pattern recognition. This can be done by making the students point out the kinds of words that follow specific rules and group them. Then the students practice this by having them read, write, and correct sentences that have words with these letters. Why this works, this strategy requires active engagement, clear understanding of the rules, and continuous practice. Also, by allowing them to create their own sentences, it makes for real-life application that helps them connect the usage of these letters to the real world. And I think this is the last one. In many Spanish dialects, the double L and Y sounds are pronounced alike. This can lead to spelling issues as different words will require different spellings, which some students can struggle picking between them. The function-focused strategy. This strategy requires you to introduce the key functions of the y and y sound. So the double L is usually for nouns, verbs, adjectives, and verbs, while the Y is for conjunctions, pronouns, and adverbs. We create a list of words that use that sound and practice identifying the function of the word. Then they decide which spelling should be used. The students then practice with word usage and context. Finally, we reinforce through explanations. So for any word that they say, this is the letter that corresponds to it, they have to be able to explain to you why. That's the one that applies to it. Why it works, this strategy works by helping the students focus on the function of the word rather than the sound. As the students learn to apply these rules, they can create a guideline for the usage of the letters. Also, by using reinforcement through explanations, the students internalize the rules and help them understand while improving their confidence.
So it's kind of a combination of memorization, but also
Yes.
some sort of explanation, so they can see their own logic, even though very often it doesn't really quite have logic. Okay, cool. That's good. All right, so you want to go next? Okay. You want to just
Creo que lo guardo en
sí, lo guardé aquí.
o algo así.
Okay. Do you want to go forward with that?
Sí, en introducción. No, mejor voy a presentar primero. Empiezo con la introducción, va a ser rápido.
Do you want
Mi nombre es Gerardo Linares y la presentación en este caso lo voy a hacer en español. Primero me gustaría empezar con la importancia de por qué se tienen que hacer este tipo de investigaciones para ayudar a las personas. La dislexia muchas veces tiende a pasar desapercibida y en ocasiones muchos padres ni siquiera logran percibir que su hijo tiene problemas con dislexia o lo confunden con otra cosa, o sea, con TDAH o cosas así. Entonces es bueno no solo investigar para nosotros o intentar nosotros ayudar a otras personas, sino a compartir esta información con las demás personas para que así se ayuden a los demás. Ya es la siguiente. La que sigue. Las 6 actividades que yo escogí en este caso y de las cuales investigué bastante es el que busca encuentra, que es una actividad que ayuda a identificar palabras, luego palabras disparatadas, que es una actividad que ayuda a mejorar la precisión y la interpretación. La tercera es saltarín de palabras, una actividad que busca desarrollar la conciencia fonética. La actividad número 4 es el relevo de palabras, que busca mejorar la precisión semántica. Luego la quinta es rimas o canciones, que ayuda a mejorar la conciencia fonológica. Y luego juegos de memoria, que busca mejorar la pronunciación y la interpretación de palabras. El que busca encuentra es una actividad que principalmente se basa en que los estudiantes se muevan alrededor de un lugar. Por ejemplo, se escriben en papeles distintos palabras que suenan iguales o que se ven casi igual y se esconden alrededor de un salón. Luego se le pide a ya sea estudiantes o personas con dislexia que busquen alrededor del lugar o salón y que luego digan la palabra en voz alta. Obviamente que se le va a preguntar a la persona, oye, ¿me puedes decir cómo se pronuncia esta palabra? O si verificar que la persona haya agarrado la palabra correcta. Por ejemplo, con el problema de la H aquí podemos ver un ejemplo con onda y onda, que normalmente como suenan igual, la H no se pronuncia, pero podría ayudar a que el estudiante aprenda a identificar el problema de la H. Como se puede ver, onda en aquel caso pues es de con H y la otra no la tiene, y luego queso y seso, son palabras que son similares pero no significan lo mismo. Luego, las palabras disparatadas, para poder hacer esta actividad se deben mostrar dos palabras, una correcta y una disparatada. Con disparatada me refiero a una palabra que no existe o que no tiene sentido, y básicamente ayuda a que la persona aprenda a identificar las palabras correctamente. Por ejemplo, aquí podemos ver vaca con B grande y luego vaca, que sería la forma correcta, con V. Entonces, abajo también está la palabra queja, con la que lleva la Q y la U, y luego la otra que lleva la K. Obviamente la correcta es queja con Q y U. Entonces, esta actividad va a ayudar para los problemas de la B, como ya lo he mostrado, la Q y con la doble L.
¿No convendría marcar la correcta con un color más saltante para que se le vaya quedando en la memoria? Por ejemplo, vaca con V.
Lo normal en la actividad es no subrayarlas para así ayudar que la persona logre hacerlo por sí misma.
Ya.
El saltarín de palabras es otra actividad que involucra que la persona se mueva, que básicamente se escriben en pedazos de cartón palabras, ya sea que disparatadas o palabras diferentes o similares, y luego se colocan en el piso para que la persona salte sobre ellas. Obviamente pues tienen que escoger la palabra correcta. Aquí está un ejemplo de más o menos cómo se miraría, y obviamente que también se pueden usar imágenes para dar apoyo visual a la persona. Y luego la persona cuando salta sobre la palabra que escoge, la tiene que decir en voz alta. Ahora, hay dos opciones. Una, pedirle a la persona que salte sobre una palabra que le diga, y luego la otra es que ellos la escojan. Además de que está la alternativa de usar sílabas. Como pueden ver, la palabra está dividida con sa, to, pa, pero obviamente hay una ayuda visual que muestra un pato. Entonces, la persona tendría que saltar con pa y luego to.
No pasa.
Sí, pues así siguen con lo demás. Luego la cuarta actividad de relevo de palabras usan palabras sin una letra, o en ocasiones hasta incluso pueden quitar dos. Esto ayuda más a que la persona aprenda a identificar qué palabras van ahí, y pues con dos ayuda más a la práctica. O por ejemplo, aquí podemos ver la palabra biberón, que obviamente le quitas las dos B's. En este caso lo que podrías hacer es darle a una persona la B grande y la V, y luego ver cómo es que él pondría las letras acá, si pondría dos V's, una B o una V, o si lo haría correctamente poniendo las dos B's normales o las correctas. Entonces, se puede usar eso y dar las letras B, Y y Q y U. Ahora, la razón por la cual se pueden dar también así palabras de forma diferente es para formar nuevas palabras. Entonces no solo sirve para que ellos completen o identifiquen qué letra va ahí, sino también para formar nuevas palabras y que ellos adquieran práctica sobre y extender su vocabulario. Entonces con esto van formando nuevas palabras e interpretando el significado de lo que están viendo. La quinta es rimas o canciones. En este caso me enfoqué más en las rimas que en las canciones. Digo, en ambos casos ambas funcionan, pero esta actividad se pueden usar rimas o canciones. Las canciones tienen que tener rimas de todas formas, por eso que me enfoqué más en las rimas. Las personas deben cantar las canciones o leer las rimas, Una recomendación es que se usen canciones que estiren las palabras, como por ejemplo, que digan cantar y que la estiren. ¿Por qué? Porque eso ayuda a que la persona escuche más cómo se dicen las palabras. Ahora, aquí podemos ver una rima que muestra el problema de la J y la G, que en algunas ocasiones se pronuncia igual, que podemos ver. Pepe el gato usa los guantes y usa las gafas de su amigo el gigante. Como pueden ver, aquí esta G se pronuncia como si fuera J. Esto ayuda a que el estudiante no solo vea en qué contexto se están usando las palabras, sino en qué casos es que se pronuncia como la G con G, ¿no? Y luego que se pronuncia como J. La número 6 es juegos de memoria. Normalmente pues no es precisamente sobre memorizar palabras, es más bien como una práctica. En esta actividad se usan flashcards con sílabas escritas o pueden ser palabras completas. Cada vez que reciban una carta deben voltear su tarjeta y pronunciar la palabra o sílaba. Por ejemplo, se le puede dar la palabra gato, luego la persona gira su carta y la dice. Uno nunca le tiene que decir cómo leer la palabra, la persona la tiene que leer para que así practique, porque podría decir jato en lugar de gato. Entonces, mientras más práctica se les dé, entonces más van a ir mejorando en ese aspecto de identificar cómo pronunciar algunas letras en algunos casos. Como por ejemplo, como les digo, con gato podría pasar eso que le ven como jato, o podrían decir girasol. Entonces, ayuda eso a la práctica. Y esas serían todas mis actividades.
Okay. Pero ves que no hay lógica, por ejemplo, girasol, no hay un razonamiento, el por qué no es con J. Entonces, es una cuestión de memorizar, entonces mientras más actividad tengamos como estás sugiriendo, que sean visuales, que sean manuales de alguna forma, se van aplicando a la cabeza.
Sí, y van extendiendo las palabras que van aprendiendo.
Muy bien. Ok. Siguiente. ¿Tú?
No sé qué le pasó a mi presentación, porque parece que se repitieron varios slideshows. Bueno, eso es lo que vi.
¿Dónde está?
Está aquí. El que dice Ace Project. Está bien aquí. Sí, como que se repitieron algunas.
How do you do this from the beginning? Do you want to just leave it like this?
Shut the slideshow.
Oh, slideshows.
So I apologize for some of the repetition ones. I don't know what happened. This is my project, the ACE project. My name is Debbie Green, and I'm going to do it in English. Dyslexia, it's a learning disorder that involves difficulty reading due to problems identifying speech sounds, learning how they relate to letters and words. Like in the PowerPoint that the professor gave us, it says Spanish tends to be the easier language for dyslexic individuals compared to English, since Spanish is regarded as orthographically transparent language. Like he said, most of the letters and the sounds go together. However, there are few where Spanish spelling is not consistent. And as we saw, there was a lot of, these were the main issues of the Spanish language. The H not pronounced at all in Spanish, the B and the B pronounced alike in dialects of Spanish, the J and the G are pronounced the same in some contexts, the QU is pronounced just like a C or a K, the Z or the C pronounced in some dialects just like the S, and the Y is pronounced in some dialects like the Y. So my first exercise would be to have activities or games that practice letter recognition. Dyslexia students benefit from being able to see the letters and connect the letter to the sound that it makes. It helps them to be able to see the pattern between the letter and the sound. So I found like they have a letter bingo, you know, where you can play with them and say the letter as it goes. That helps them to be able to connect the sound with the letter. There's also being able to physically see the letter and connect la mayúscula con la minúscula, and just showing them flashcards of how the letter is supposed to sound and what the letter looks like, allows them to see that connection. And then that's where it repeats itself. I don't know what happened. So exercise 2 there goes. Games with creating words with magnets. So dyslexic students tend to be very visual, like they need to see it in order to kind of understand it. So dyslexic students benefit from doing activities that are physical. So creating words in Spanish with magnets is a great activity to do. So just simple magnets and saying words together and finding what letters go in that word. So I have 2 examples, como harina. Harina, you would say it, but you know, they would have probably a hard time knowing that it has an H on it. So if you allow them to spell it out and then correct them if they don't put the H, then they're able to say, oh, even though I don't hear the in harina, then they're still able to make that connection with the letter and the word. Same thing with hablar. Hablar it has an H, but you don't hear it. You just think it's just that part.
So we have a very close word, arena,
Mhm.
that doesn't have an H,
Mhm.
right? So we have arena with an H, but arena without an H.
So another one would be multi-sensory activities with words. Dyslexic students benefit from activities that engage with their auditory, tactical, visual, and even taste base. This allows for the students to be able to use their other senses to recognize letters. So up top we have like just playing with sand and writing out words, with Play-Doh making out words. And these are like different ways that you can use different words in Spanish that kids tend to struggle with, and just use where they can actually touch it and see it, and sometimes even feel them spelling the words. So that tends to help them. Another exercise would be reading activities that involve reading out loud. Dyslexic students benefit from reading out loud because it allows them to practice their reading and being able to improve in their pronunciation on the words that may be more of a challenge to them. So just reading with them, allowing them to read, and allowing them to be able to kind of pronounce the words the way they think they pronounce it, and then kind of explain to them how it actually pronounces. So you might have a kid that sees the word harina, but might think it's a harina, or has another kind of, the H has an actual sound. Then you can explain to them, oh, okay, I see what you're trying to do, but in this case, the H doesn't have any pronunciation. So you would just say harina, and that allows them to make that connection in their mind to be able to say, oh, okay, sometimes, well, most of the time the H doesn't have a sound, so I don't need to put a sound in it.
Yeah, they have demonstrated that reading out loud is more convenient for even just the memorization of words,
Mhm.
not just the spelling. But when you pronounce it, it has a double, you have the visual and you have the sound impact on the brain. So it's easy to memorize words.
Practicing rhyming words, dyslexic students benefit from activities with rhymes. Rhymes is one of the best phonological awareness activities. So there's different games. There's this game that I found that allows them to practice rhymes while they're actually playing a game. Even like gato, pato, oveja, abeja, it allows them to see that words rhyme, but they're spelled differently. And even these two, you would put them together kind of like a puzzle, like gata and bata. You would see that they're rhyme, and you would put them together so they could be able to connect how they rhyme and how they sound. And then this is the last one. Games or activities that practice using syllables. So syllables is another great exercise for a student with dyslexia. Syllables is another factor of phonemic awareness that allows them to identify specific sounds. So just having different games for them to play. Even I found a bingo syllable game where they would have to connect the words, and then if they had part of the syllable, then it could be like a little bingo game. Or just putting two words together like gato, vaca. Just being able to connect those two together allows them to be able to practice and be able to be aware of those different phonemic awareness that they need.
We we see some of the games are similar,
Yeah.
as you expect. Okay, so we have, okay, where is yours?
It's the one on the very right, the PowerPoint side. The other one, right there. I think you can just click present on the top right.
Um,
Okay, so here's my presentation for my ACE project. Karen, nice to meet you. And then, it's like, I don't know why there's a little.
Oh, where is this? Where's that coming
From my
from?
laptop.
Oh, from the laptop.
Okay, so I'm just gonna introduce the assignment and then activities 1 through 6 after that. So dyslexia is a learning disorder that involves difficulty reading due to problems identifying speech sounds and learning how to relate to letters and words. So oftentimes these students usually have to practice a little extra than students that are not diagnosed with dyslexia. So that usually involves either extra practice with a teacher or extra practice outside of school just to make sure that they stay on track with their learning. And this just basically describes the types of exercises that I'll be talking about. So for my first activity or exercise, this is going to mainly target the H not pronounced, or the H not being pronounced in all like Spanish words like we just talked about in other presentations. So for me, like as a kid growing up and learning Spanish, I thought one of the best ways was just for like basically get a list of words and then go through those words, practice, and visually see the words. And after that, maybe get with a partner and see if you can be able to identify those words with a partner, and they can also like double check whether you're pronouncing those words correctly as well. But yeah, a worksheet with different range of words that has a silent H in them will allow the student to practice and identify those words more easily.
I've noticed that in compositions, particularly the H that is inside of a word, a lot of people like cohesión and things like that. It's just when enhorabuena, very often they miss that because the H at the very beginning kind of stands out, you know, visually.
Yeah.
But the one inside is kind of hidden away. So I've noticed a lot of people misspelling that.
And then for my activity 2, this basically addresses the issue of ve y uve, how they're pronounced alike in dialects in Spanish, but some words use one letter versus the other. And then you can basically use tongue twisters to challenge and gain confidence with those sounds. You can practice your pronunciation and fluency as well as just by practicing and repeating different words all in one row just to make sure that your brain is processing that this letter matches with these words and this other letter matches with the other words. That way you get, I guess, more practice with the V and the UV. So you can either start with a more intermediate level one, which is el bebé, bebé, bebidas con burbujas. And you can start like very slow and then slowly speed it up as you gain more confidence. And then as well, you can move on to different levels of trabalenguas as well to see if you can challenge yourself to visually and like, I guess, dialect-wise.
Actually, it's really fun.
Yeah, I found it online, so I was like, I'm gonna provide like more harder examples. And then this would allow the students also to get a little fun out of it because they'll obviously stumble with their words. So I'll get like a little giggle out of them. So it'll allow that memorization to stick with them further as well. Okay, so for my third activity is the jota and the fe are pronounced the same in context. So for this one, it's just creating like maybe like a worksheet where we take spaces from certain words and allow students to see that the letter can be seen at the start of the word, in the middle of the word, or at the end of the word. That way they can see that those letters can be incorporated in different portions of the word. And then the worksheet can be seen as this. And you can either start with one category where you just incorporate the G sound into the word and then transition into the J sound. So, for example, for number 1, you have proteger, but the student would obviously have to correlate whether that word's going to require the G or the J. So those types of exercises would really allow the students to connect whether the word requires a G or a J, and it would also allow them to, once they place the letter in that space, they can also read it together, so that way they can get an extra set of practice after they completed the exercise as well. this one is just addressing the who is pronounced C or K and the Q issue. So basically by practicing the pronunciation, this can allow the students to, I guess, kind of understand that there's a difference between all three of the sounds. So I found this worksheet where it just basically kind of has like all three of them together. And the students can kind of introduce the concept to them, because I know it's a little bit kind of a hard thing to correlate when you're like a small kid. But it has words with a hard C, so carro, and then it has a K, koala, and then Q with queso. So giving them a list that can fit into those three categories can allow them to continue practicing their pronunciation, and it can also allow them to visually see that those words might sound like they require the different letter, but it actually requires the first, I guess, the letter that is in the category.
Right. Thankfully, we don't have a lot of words with K. So.
Yeah. So activity 5, it's kind of like the same for the first activity that I mentioned, just to address the C's, as I said that in the say, pronouncing some words. So the letter C, or the se, zeta, can be pronounced as ese, and different sorry. The best way to practice this issue is just The best way to practice this issue is basically just to go through the same thing, go through a worksheet and get more familiarity with the words and how you would sound them. And then you could either practice this individually, or once you reach a good point, you can recruit a partner to make sure they're pronouncing words correctly. Like I said, at first when you're introducing this concept, it's good for students to go through it on their own, just to make sure that they're a little bit more confident. And then maybe towards like once the concept's a little bit more comfortable for the students, they can either work in pairs or in groups, and they can set it up as a little contest and see who can get the most words correct through each practice round. And that way the students can get like a little engagement with peers, as well as like repeating the exercise that's on the worksheet. And then this basically addresses my last exercise, which is the sound, which is this good sound, eating. Placing those words on the list by themselves would be the best way to introduce this topic, just to make sure that the students are more comfortable to place those words in a sentence. So for example, you would pronounce lluvia as lluvia with the Y, or se llama as llama with the Y, which we talked about previously. So here are a couple of other words that I found that are the same, where like the pronunciation might look a bit different than the spelling, so it might be helpful for students to already be familiar with a couple of the most common words regarding that. So just kind of going through and repeating and making sure that the students correlate that the spelling is different than the pronunciation of the word. But yeah.
I would put the correct one in a different color and emphasize that. I mean, the other ones look very strange too, visually, you know, because they're obviously incorrect. But I still would emphasize the one like in red or something like that.
And then basically finding tips and takeaways whenever you're incorporating the exercises is just to make sure that you're consistent with rehearsals and making sure that the students are aware that they need to practice these activities outside of class, just to make sure that they're constantly able to like keep up with the concepts and make sure that their proficiency increases throughout the time that they're in the class. And it also allows them to like gain familiarity with the activities, and then as well monitor their progress in the classroom as well as outside of the class. Also refine the delivery style, so making sure to pay attention to the students' pacing, their tone, and the emphasis in certain words to make sure that they're pronouncing the words correctly. And then timing and transition, making sure that they're able to incorporate the words in full sentences once they're more comfortable with the concepts. And they're able to transition from the words in the sentence and allow the flow to occur smoothly. And then practice with an audience, because sometimes students are comfortable practicing on their own, but then once they're up in public speaking, they get a little more shy with their skills. So making sure that they're able to practice with somebody so they can listen to their progress and allow them to give feedback about their pronunciation will allow them to get more confidence with those exercises as well.
Okay, so we have one person left. Okay, which one is yours?
It's on a Google Doc. I didn't make a
Oh, it's in a
slideshow.
Google Doc. Did you send it to me? Oh, you already sent it?
Opened it.
Is it
ACE would be that.
Okay.
Yeah, types of exercises. So I'm Joselle. I just wrote 6 exercises for dealing with the 6 issues that dyslexic people have in Spanish. So the first one is dictation practice to improve listening, writing, and spelling accuracy. So they would read a list of words or short passage that feature the target spelling rules. They'd write down what they hear, and then we would all review the words together, discussing if they made mistakes, what's correct, what not. So like the H issue would be hora, ser, huevo, the V issue, banco, viento, things like that. For the second one, it's fill in the blank, and then the objective would be to apply spelling rules in context. So they would be provided a set of sentences with missing words, where they'd have to fill in the correct spelling. And then this could be done with multiple choice or open-ended questions. So some examples for like the J and the G would be me gusta jugar por fútbol. The ZC, el zapato es nuevo, things like that. The third one is word sorting to help students categorize words based on the target spelling rules. So we create a set of words that feature the spelling issues, so H, B, B, and have students sort them into categories based on the spelling rules. So for the H issue, it would be comparisons like huevo versus hizo, the BB issue, mapo versus lele.
So you would just create lists with sorted by letter.
Mm-hmm. And then for the fourth one is pretty simple, it's true or false statements. So just to improve the understanding of spelling rules and pronunciation differences. So I would create a list of true or false statements related to each issue, and then the students would decide if it was correct or false. Like for the H issue, the H in hacer is pronounced, and that would be false. And then you go through all of them like that. For this one, it would be sentence creation. So the students have to use spelling rules actively in written expressions. So I would give students a list of words with each spelling issue, and then ask them to write sentences using those words so that they could see that they could properly spell. And then again, afterwards we review, correct, and go over. So for like the H issue would be spelling huevo, hacer, hora, things like that. And for final one, it's word creation or storytelling to reinforce understanding of spelling through creativity. So I would ask students to create new words that follow the same rules. So they could do that, or they could even go and make like a short story or presentation. And so it would be like for the Q issue, they write a story with words that contain the QU, the quinto, quien. Or for the ZC, they would have to create sentences that feature both the C and the C appropriately, as zapato or encima. And then at the end, I have a summary of all the exercises. And these exercises offer a variety of ways to practice the 6 spelling issues, ensuring that students not only learn the rules, but also apply them in both written and spoken contexts. Each activity reinforces the spelling rules actively and can be tailored to different learning styles and levels.
Okay. All right, so a couple of questions. First of all, which issue do you think is more problematic from your experience, of your personal experience, or if you have taught, or if you have you ever tried to teach people in Spanish? What of the issues that we talk about, which one do you think is the most problematic in Spanish?
So my husband is not a native Spanish speaker, he
Okay.
only speaks English. So most of the time, he struggles with the H issue and the alias issue,
Okay.
and that's his biggest thing, and he's always like, but why, but
Right.
why? And I'm like, I just don't know.
Yeah, that's my logic. And yeah,
For me, it was, or growing up, or like me and my sister growing up with my mom teaching us Spanish, it was the ve y ube, because it was like, she was always like, remember, it's the de vaca or
Mhm.
the burro, like whenever you're talking about different words. So, because we would always like switch the letters because we were like, but it sounds like it should be spelled this way, but it's actually spelled the other way.
Right.